Okay. So friends, welcome. Thank you for being with us. We are expecting about 4 or 5 more people, but I will admit them as they come in. Hopefully we will notice this. I'm going to attempt to not do the mute all, but if you have sounds in the background, and somebody does now, please mute yourselves as we go. But hopefully we will, this will lead towards discussion. Somebody's got a radio or something on in the background.
This is Adrian. Dustin Messerly called me.
All right. Yeah, Ben, I'm going to mute you.
And
sorry, Ben. I heard Adrian in the background there, so I muted you, Ben. So we're going to do introductions in just a moment, but welcome to Foundations for Thoughtful Judaism, an introduction to Judaism. This is our first class. The topic tonight is being and becoming, but I will explain more about what that means shortly. So I'm going to stop the share right at the beginning as we begin with introductions. And in many ways, this may be some of the most interesting part of our entire time together. If you'll tell a little bit about who you are and what drew you to take this, what led you to be interested in taking this 6-part series as an introduction to Judaism, but also material from the Shalom Hartman Institute. So I think I have all of us on screen in a gallery view. I'm going to close this. I'm not sure if that's right. Hang on. Participants, that's right. Okay. So I have maximized our ability to see each other. So let's go around and introduce ourselves. But we'll start with the president of our congregation, Marilyn Blackhall.
Wow, I get to go first. Wow.
Rank has its privileges.
Yes, I'm back in St. Thomas after traveling all over, and I purposely came back for this class because, well, all the classes that Hartman has given, the Hartman Institute has given, are always interesting. And our rabbi is really a very excellent person to do these presentations. So that's really why I'm here, and kind of as a review.
Great, thanks.
And welcome to everybody.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? I see you, Sydney. Sydney Kashansky, where are you and who are you?
Oops.
You're muted. No, you're still muted. Sorry, one sec. Yeah, Sydney, go ahead. Uh-oh. Sydney, this is very interesting, except that your microphone must not be on your end. So while you work on that, I'm going to go to somebody else and we'll come back to you, Sydney.
Speak up. Andrea, speak up.
Andrea, go ahead.
yes, my name is Andrea Weibel. I'm a past president of the congregation, and I'm always interested in being in touch with my friends in St. Thomas. I especially enjoy Michael Feshbach's lectures when he does our Friday Shabbat and Saturday Shabbat services. And just because I'm interested in Judaism and always have been.
Great, thanks, Andrea. And where are you? In Florida?
I am in Pembroke Pines, Florida.
Okay, great. Sydney, can we hear you yet? No, shoot, sorry. All right, it's at your computer's end. You can put something in the chat if you want, but almost hear you. Wow, okay.
I can
Yes,
go.
go ahead, Kathy.
Aloha, I'm Kathy Sachs. I live in Honolulu. I've been in the Caribbean many times. I've worked there. My parents owned a home when I was a kid, although I'm from New York. And I have very little Jewish background. And my friends and I were there several years ago and wandering the streets and stumbled upon the synagogue. And I was very moved by the story, so I joined, even though I live in Hawaii. And I always read the Rabbi's newsletter, and I'm very moved by what you write, Rabbi. So
Wow,
this
thank
was a
you.
great opportunity for me to meet everybody and learn a little bit about my own religion. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Kathy. Aloha, welcome. Which island are you on?
I'm on Oahu.
Great, okay. Sharon,
Well, I am in the process of moving full-time to St. Croix, and I'm a Chai member. And Michael got me through COVID with weekly Friday night services and sermons, and I've never taken one of these courses before, but I knew that if Michael was teaching it or leading it, that it would be something I would be interested in. And my husband's going to listen in. He's not Jewish, but he's going to listen in to see what he can learn.
great, terrific, okay. Sydney, you've come back in, okay, Katina, I saw you waving.
Okay, hi, I'm Katina Koulianos, member of the Hebrew congregation and a past president, and I don't think this is going to be as, it says introduction, but I think it'll be more than that. And I'm interested in stuff, so it's something to do, be with people, whatever, like that.
Tonight, we'll give you an overview of the whole foundations, even though we're only doing 6 select courses from it. Ben. Unmute, Ben, unmute.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Good evening, all. I'm Ben Kraft. I'm on St. Thomas. I grew up in the Episcopal Church. I always have had an interest in religion. I took a couple of religion courses in college. I have roots. My great-grandfather was a German Jew, came to the United States in 1865, and so there is a link there. And since I've been on St. Thomas and gone a few times to the synagogue, I've always been impressed by the similarity of the prayers in the services there. The Jewish and the Christian prayers, I mean, they're very similar. The messages are very similar, and that impressed me. And so I want to learn more about the Jewish religion. And my wife is also listening in. Thank you very much. I'm looking for. Oh, and one other thing is I always like hearing Rabbi Michael make his presentations because they're always interesting.
Well, thank you. But I've got great material I'm working with now. Sydney, we're going to try you again.
I think you got to tell him where on his screen to look for the unmute.
Yeah, Sydney, you I still can't hear you. I try the bottom left-hand part of the screen and see if your microphone is not connected. I'm gonna, Emily Calhoun, is that you?
Yes, I can go. Hi, I'm
Hey.
Emily. I'm on St. Thomas, lived here about a year now. I grew up in Boston. I lived in Oahu for 8 years.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you who you're rooting for tonight. Okay, go ahead.
And from Oahu to DC and DC to here. My interest in this class is to educate myself so I can help educate my children better
Great.
about Judaism.
Okay, let's see. Mark Borden. Unmute.
My name is Mark Borden. I live here on St. Thomas. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees at the Temple. I'm retired, and anytime I can either read something or attend a class or learn something new, I'm all for it. So this came up during high holiday services, caught my attention, and always like the rabbi's view on different topics.
Thanks, Mark. Before we switch to physicians, I will stick with attorneys. So Carol and Jennifer.
Hello, We're Jennifer Adiano and Carol Rich. We're both on St. Thomas, and we both are half Jewish, and we've recently gotten interested in Judaism as adults and as a family thing. So yeah, we're just hoping to learn a bit more than we have already.
Yeah, and we've enjoyed being involved with the synagogue for the last few years, and we enjoy Rabbi Michael's sermons, and so we just want to expand our knowledge of our culture and our background.
Thanks. Any other attorneys? Ellen, you're not an attorney, are you?
Volunteering.
All right. So,
Attorney.
yes, Ted, are you an attorney?
Retired attorney, yes.
Okay, go ahead. You're next.
During the pandemic, I became somewhat addicted to your Torah study classes. And I view this as an opportunity to continue learning.
Thanks. And you're in New Jersey.
I'm in South Orange, New Jersey. Next to me is Toby, my wife.
I'm not a lawyer, though.
That's fine. It's allowed. Karen, I don't know what your profession is, so. Oh, you're muted.
I'm retired from the federal government. Worked 30 years for the feds.
Wow, okay.
Anyway, what drove me here is that I wanted the experience from the Hartman Institute, and I am forever indebted to Rabbi Michael for helping me getting through Bobby's illness and Bobby's death.
Thank you, Karen, from Malden, Massachusetts. Right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, sure did.
Malden.
Malden, yeah, Red Sox fan, sorry.
Okay. All right, let's switch to the physicians. Don't worry, Rachel, I see you there. And a few others we haven't gotten to yet, but Nancy?
Greetings, Kathy Sachs. We're going to be representing the West Coast. I'm in Long Beach, California, originally from New Jersey. And of course, I've completely lost my accent. I was on St. Thomas about 20 years ago teaching at the university. And so everybody told me that there was a synagogue and I didn't believe it. And there actually is. So I became a Chai member. And I would just want to thank the rabbi because COVID, as you can imagine, has been unimaginable. And the weekly sessions have been so fantastic. I've never done a Shalom Hartman Institute course, but anytime I can listen to the rabbi is great. And I apologize in advance. I may be turning my screen off because I'm still at work.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Winkelstein. I'm in Buffalo, New York. And basically I will join anything that Michael is teaching. It's simple as that. I met Michael when he was our rabbi here in Buffalo many years ago, and obviously we've stayed in touch, close touch since. But I'm particularly pleased to be doing the Hartman material because we had the opportunity in the Israel trip a couple of years ago with Michael to go to the Hartman Institute and hear a lecture there. Yep, there it is in the background. So I feel a particular connection to it, having actually been there. And now I kind of follow their podcasts and their material and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very much looking forward to this particular class.
Thank you so much. Ellen, I'm saving you for last. I've known you the longest, even longer than I've known Peter, actually. Right. So, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I'm calling from the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts. And I am Jewish and don't know as much as I could. So I'm here to learn more. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Toby, you're waving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll speak for myself. also in New Jersey and married to Ted. I'm a psychologist, so I'm a kind of doctor. We also, I can echo what Peter said, we also got very enamored of the Saturday morning services of Rabbi Michael and learn a lot from him. And this seemed like a great opportunity to learn some more. And we visited the island maybe 7 years ago and visited the synagogue and became Chai members at that time and want to keep supporting it. So,
Thanks.
And I'm a Boston girl.
Ah, okay. I'm outnumbered I think, tonight, Peter. It's yeah. Julie's not on, or she would help with the balance.
You're
here.
outnumbered. You're outnumbered, Michael.
I'm a Nationals fan. I married into being a Yankee fan. Ellen,
Go Tigers.
who I've known
Yay.
the longest of anybody here, Ellen Garrick, with an extraordinarily interesting tie to this kind of course.
Well, I don't even know where to start. I'm Ellen Garrett from Maryland. My parents knew Michael's parents, so that's why I go way back. But I also run a foundation called the National Center to Encourage Judaism, which my folks set up, which helps organizations sponsor programs like Introduction to Judaism to welcome more people to Judaism.
I was so thrilled when I was in rabbinical school to be flown from Cincinnati to Denver for a week-long exploration of how to teach introductory Judaism and do outreach, and realized that it was funded by the Garrick Family Foundation. So here's this family I had known my entire life who is doing this amazing work. So thank you all and welcome. I am really glad to be with you. I'm very excited about this. We're going to go to back to the share screen. I might highlight myself just in terms of spotlighting for teaching for now, but mostly we're going to be on the screen, but there will be a number of discussion points where we will come off it. So back to, yeah, these slides are actually bigger than I thought they would be. I assume everybody can see this. Let's go to the next one. In Jewish life, we consider the Torah to be not only the narrow definition of Torah. Ben Kraft talked about how there's a Torah in his family. He means a Torah scroll. The Torah scroll has the first 5 books. And how do we remember the order of the first 5 books in English? G.E. lights never die, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The problem with that mnemonic is that GE is no longer making light bulbs. So if you say that to younger people, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. But the word Torah in Jewish life means not only the 5 books of Moses, but also really all of Jewish learning. So this bracha, this blessing, we use as an opening for almost all of our study. It could be a Jewish cooking class. It could be a class about Israel, and we would still open with this bracha. So please join me. We'll do the Hebrew and then the English. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, the ever-present, our God, sovereign of all time and space, who brings holiness to our lives through the mitzvah of living out words of Torah. Technically, it's through the study of Torah. I have a kind of overview that I want to do at the opening tonight of what we are doing and where we are going. And first, that opens with what is the Shalom Hartman Institute. And as we said earlier, if you can see me, I'm very small now, but this is part of the Shalom Hartman Institute in the background here. I am teaching from the grounds right outside of the Kogod Research Institute and the Beit Midrash, the House of Study. The Shalom Hartman Institute is a think tank founded in honor of his father by Rabbi David Hartman. Now, I saw, Sydney, you wrote in the chat that you are from Montreal. David Hartman was a rabbi, American-born, but in Montreal when he made Aliyah to Israel in the 70s, I believe, founded this educational center for the Jewish people. It is one of the only multi-denominational institutions or pluralistic institutions in Israel. That is, it is a center of learning for humanistic Jews, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, Orthodox, to some extent, mostly centrist Orthodox, less so the ultra-Orthodox, but it is a remarkable place. It's based in Jerusalem, but there's a North American branch. Both bases are often referred to separately or together as Hartman. And Hartman is committed to the idea that ideas matter. So when this is called an introduction to Judaism, here's what this won't be. This is not going to be a focus on this is how you light the candles. Those are very important classes. This isn't that. Here's why you do, 8 light nights of Hanukkah. Again, very important. That's not what this is. This is going to focus on broad and basic foundational ideas. Foundations for a thoughtful Judaism is a well-named class. It's a pluralistic curriculum. What is Foundations? It is a pluralistic curriculum developed by the Hartman Institute. It's an introduction to the deep concepts of Judaism and Jewish life. And it is an invitation for learners to join in an interpretive conversation. So what I want to talk about for a minute is, what do you think we mean? And here, I made a point of pointing out the lawyers. What do I mean by an interpretive conversation? Anyone, even if we can't see each other because you're minimized and I'm still doing the screen share, what's an interpretive conversation?
From a legal viewpoint, if you got 2 lawyers interpreting something, you'll get 3 different opinions.
Actually, the joke that I know is 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So, yeah. But ultimately, what is it that lawyers interpret? It may not be every single case, but ultimately it goes back to what, Mark? In the United States, it goes back to?
Goes back to the Constitution and the treatises.
Right. So
we interpret precedent, and what does it mean?
So, a foundational document, and then the ways in which that document has an impact over time. That's what both Carol and Mark just said, right? That is essentially the secret of Jewish life as well. It is a generational conversation or an intergenerational conversation, sparked by a text, sparked by something which a community considered to be holy. And so part of what we are doing is we are talking about the great ideas of the Jewish people. My wife, Julie, is just coming in. We're talking about the great ideas of the Jewish people, but we will anchor it in a text and look at how that unfolds over time. So here's a little bit more about the Shalom Hartman Institute, but I'm going now to the center of the page. In Foundations, we present the way Jews have taken the sacred texts of our tradition and made them their own, further shaping the tradition and passing it along to generations that followed. And I'll give you an example by what that means to make it its own. And this, for the moment, I'm going to talk about the issue of who can testify in a court of Jewish law. And a certain group is barred from testifying in a court of Jewish law. Anybody know who is not allowed to testify in Jewish law? Marilyn, you'll be very offended. So start us out. Who's not allowed to testify? Women, that's correct. Who else? Male minors, and I don't mean people who dig for coal, right? Those who are underage, who are men, right? And those who are blind, because, a blind person is going to testify, right? Like, that I saw this or didn't see this. And once you've got blind people, who else?
Yeah.
Deaf people, right? And then those who are mentally incompetent. So along comes sign language. And now, how is the word cheresh, which means deaf, interpreted in Jewish law? It means a deaf person who is also mentally incompetent. Well, that's not what it meant. except now that's what it means, right? That is an interpretive tradition which takes insights from the needs of your time that we're living in and applies it in the modern world. I already spoke about the last the aspect here, pluralism. Many voices have come to shape the varieties of Judaism today. Like the heritage it reflects, Foundations is not dogmatic. Instead, it brings together many voices of the tradition to conversations about life's big questions and dilemmas. By exploring varied responses, Foundations remains faithful to the plurality of approaches found in Jewish thought on any given issue. Often, these approaches are in conflict with each other. To be pluralistic is to recognize the value of others' opinions, which you may not agree with, but which you can respect. This does not mean that there's no wrong interpretations. Maybe we'll try, as part of our time together, to come up with something that everybody will agree is wrong, right? But that's not that easy to do. But rather, there's a range of positions that are seen as having values. And finally, Judaism is a tradition rich with meaningful ideas. When one takes seriously the notion that Judaism is an interpretive tradition, it becomes the responsibility of Jews living at a given time to see their teaching and study as a way to shed light on, we look at the world through Jewish eyes, right? The world around us, and we bring to it the values of Judaism. And that is what we are trying to do ultimately. I have chosen a six weeks of an introductory an introduction to Judaism, but I want to look at the entire Foundations for a Thoughtful Judaism. And if you are interested in staying together beyond this 6 weeks, you can look at this, and I'm going to send you this as a PDF later tonight, and you can give me input about what you are interested in pursuing further, Katina. Since Katina is often one of the only ones or first ones that gives me feedback about what learning she wants to do. So here is a quick overview. Foundations for a Thoughtful Judaism rests on 4 pillars. The first volume is Peoplehood, and tonight's class and next week's session come from Peoplehood. This volume explores questions related to the collective experience of Jewish life. What does it mean to be part of a community? How do you enter? How do you become Jewish? How do you enter into a Jewish community if you are Jewish? What's the purpose of community? What's the value proposition of viewing this large umbrella of Judaism? To what extent can communities and even the Jewish people contain diversity and shared values at the same time? That we're going to start talking about tonight. And what does Jewish peoplehood entail today when we have 2 different centers of Jewish life that are both strong and independent from each other? So to look at the Peoplehood volume, the first is 3 classes on understanding the concept of peoplehood, and we're doing being and becoming tonight. Next week, we are continuing with what I am calling multiple paths, which actually you can see is the first class in Unit 2 about belonging to the Jewish people. The Jewish people as a tribal family, however, that has diverse communities within it and splits within it, as Julie, who was on with us, said about synagogue life, split happens.
Yeah.
And what do we owe each other? And then finally, you can't really talk about peoplehood without talking about the anchor of peoplehood, and that is the centrality of place. What does that mean? Where do we live? What do we call home? What does it mean to have a homeland? So that's peoplehood, as briefly as I can. The next volume is faith, and it is we are doing 2 classes from faith on October 19th and 26th. This volume explores questions related to what is a relationship with God and what a life of faith entails. Where does faith come from? What's it mean to be faithful? What are models in Jewish tradition for a complex relationship with God that includes reverence and joy, but also anger and argument? Where does doubt fit into a life of faith? What do we do with Jews who do not believe in God. So here we're going to talk about, we're going to look at the first class in the first unit, Pathways to Faith. And then I think on October 26th, the next one, Trust and Risk is the next one we're going to do. How do science and spirituality coincide with each other is the third class in this unit, which we're not doing now. Argument and submission. You know, the name of Islam, the religion of Islam, is submission, right? A Muslim is one who submits. Inshallah, the Muslim greeting is if God wills it. That is not absent from Judaism. I know somebody who named their dog Ovadia, but what does Ovadia mean? Eved Adonai. It's the same thing as the king of Jordan, Abdallah, right? Ebed, Ibid, slave of, servant of Allah in the case of Abdallah, Ovadia, servant of God. Intimacy and distance, faith and ethics, although we'll come back to ethics. What are different, where is God in our lives? Is God in our lives, right? The Bible talks about a God who is very present. The rabbinic approach, I'm looking at Unit 3, Class 2, is of a God, the experience of a God. The temple is destroyed. God is absent. The old sacrifices which guaranteed your crops for next year are gone. Moving forward, how do you cope with tragedy? How do you cope with blessing? That's the volume on faith. The volume on Jewish practice explores questions that are fundamental to Jewish practice. Not how do you light the candles, but what is the concept of commandments all about? Why do people and human beings need ritual? What does it do to have a ritual life? What does having a tradition, how does that impact on autonomy? So we're going to do the class session that is on November 2nd. We're doing Understanding Mitzvah, which I'm calling Choice and Commandment. If ritual, I'm looking at just beyond what we're able to do. If ritual is commanded, do you have to mean what you do? What's the role of sincerity? If you do something of your own free will, is that better or worse than you're doing it because you're commanded to? That's class 3. Sustaining relationships in Jewish practice, our obligations to others, our obligations to God, our obligation to the Jewish community as a whole. And the final section here, time, space, holiness, the body. That is the third of the 4 pillars. And finally, ethics, and we're going to do just one section on ethics. We're doing creation and covenant, which is going to be a bridge between classes 1 and classes 2. Tensions between a creation-based approach to ethics and a covenantal-based approach to ethics. And what we're not going to have a chance to do in these 6 weeks, these units on interpersonal ethics, the bystander effect, our obligation to rebuke, or can anybody really pull off rebuking somebody else, of sacrifice, of yourself and the community, making moral choices, and how Judaism makes moral choices, and both intergenerationally and morality in general. So that was a lot of talking, but that is the overview of Foundations for a Thoughtful Judaism. Of all of that, I have chosen our 6 topics. I will tell you that in addition to training videos that I watch every week in order to prepare, there are also podcasts that are available for you. And I have a problem here. And the problem is that I saved the link to the Peoplehood podcast on here, and it's not showing. I'm going to send you a PDF of this later, and I think it was saved on the PDF. But of the podcasts for this week and next week, there are 3 podcasts in the Peoplehood section. Only one of them exists so far, and it's not the one that's as relevant to the 2 classes we are doing. So I am going to send you a link to Peoplehood and Place. And that's a podcast you can listen to on your own. But what is Jewish peoplehood, which relates to tonight's topic, and the boundaries of Jewish peoplehood, which is somewhat about tonight and next week, those podcasts are not published yet. I will send them to you when they do come. And now, having said all that, we are arriving at the beginning of tonight's class. So thank you for your patience. This is the framework for tonight. Being and becoming. Now this, those of you who have studied with me before will know and recognize something in here that sounds a little bit like my approach. I'm going to share my approach with you at the end tonight. But as part of peoplehood, Judaism is a multi-layered in that it is both rooted in ideology, religion, and in family ties, peoplehood. In this unit, Being and Becoming, we explore foundational questions about the interaction between ideology and heredity by considering the role of Jewish peoplehood in Jewish life. What is the relationship between being a member of a people and being a member of a religious group? What tensions arise between Judaism as a people and as a religion? How does one navigate commitments to your own people, as well as commitments to the broader world and all people? So initial questions, and again, I wish we could be looking at each other. Okay, I'm going to I'm going to stop share for a moment so we can see each other. Here are the two questions. What, if anything, try to remember these. What, if anything, do Jews have in common? When, if ever, have you felt part of the Jewish people? Okay, and I am removing the spotlight from myself because I want us to be able to see everybody. So, whoops. How did that happen? Let's go back to gallery view. There we go. Okay. What was the first question? What do Jews have in common? Any thoughts or reactions?
One God. History.
What? History.
Matzo ball soup.
History is interesting. I am going to poke holes in some of these, though. What about somebody who becomes Jewish as an adult? In some ways, we do then have history in common, but we'll come back to that. Matzo ball soup, who said that?
I did.
I love that. That's terrific. What if you're Sephardic and you come from
Morocco? Well, I'm talking about food in general.
Okay.
Jewish food.
All right, that means that Jews and Italians are the same group.
Yep. Celebrations, holidays.
Okay, celebrations and holidays.
Belief in Israel.
Belief in Israel. I want to say that that's an important idea. I hate to admit this because I really don't like this, but are there Jews who are against the concept of there being a Jewish state?
Yes.
Yes, they're very worth it.
Also, Orthodox are, aren't they?
Yeah, the very few are actually against the concept. Some of them are against the modern political expression of the state of Israel. But there are those who are against even the concept of it.
They're waiting for the Messiah.
Well, some Jews are waiting for them. So these are ideas that many Jews have in common, but some Jews think the Messiah already came. I don't mean Jews for Jesus. I don't think those are Jewish. I think they're Christians. But what do I mean? What do I mean by people who think the Messiah already came?
Rabbi Schneerson?
Yeah, I'm referring to Chabad.
That's right. Because
As best as I can tell, about a third of the Chabad movement believes that Menachem Mendel Schneerson was the Messiah. About a third thinks he was, about another third thinks he was the Messiah, but shh, don't talk about it. And another third thinks he was merely the most important human being who ever lived. Right? But there have been various breakaways from Judaism in the past over arguments over Messiah. Christianity is not the only one. Chabad is not yet broken off from Judaism, but it is not the only one. There are others over time. So the belief in Messiah is an important one. Okay.
What about the Shema?
What about the Shema? Well, what if can you be atheist? Can you be an atheist and be Jewish?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we will circle back to the Shema. I think that these are foundational ideas, matzo ball soup and the Shema. But we will, the world is circular, life is a circle, it's a matzo ball. When Rudy, not Giuliani, Boschwitz, was the senator from Minnesota, he got so many phone calls of people saying, Jewish senator from Minnesota. And by the way, he was the first, but there were 3 Jews in a row who held that seat, right? After Boschwitz was eventually defeated by the guy who died in a plane crash, Paul Wellstone, who was Jewish.
And then there was a guy on Saturday Night Live.
And Wellstone was replaced
Franken.
by another Republican, Norm Coleman, who was Jewish. So 3 Jews in a row in that Senate seat. Boschwitz was asked by so many grandmothers, "Can you set my grandson up? He's moving to Washington." That he initiated a very large Erev Christmas Eve social for Jewish singles in Washington, and it was called for years. It was called the
Matzo ball.
Called the matzo ball. Yes,
They have that here. They have that here too.
okay. So let's. What about the second question? When have you ever felt a part of the Jewish people, if ever?
When I was in Israel.
Okay, Israel often does it in an immersion way that people who like, oh my God, the taxi driver is Jewish, kind of thing. The lifeguard at the beach is, right? That Israel is an immersive experience that provides that sense of Jewish peoplehood to many people. On the other hand, I've never felt so much as an American as when I've lived in Israel, right? Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing it this way, right? So it brings out not only sameness, but also other aspects of difference. When else? Anybody else? Hi, Kendra.
Visiting Holocaust sites.
Visiting Holocaust sites. Okay. Since Kendra is on, I have a question for some of you who are on or listening who are not Jewish. And that is a strange question. Have you ever felt a part of the Jewish people?
Yes.
Okay.
Although I feel like I have to identify with the stranger in your midst tradition.
I bet that, yes, probably, but there may be moments.
Oh, there are definitely moments.
There are moments when you forgot that part even.
Yeah, I think the Shabbat service we went to in Tel Aviv a couple of summers ago.
Interesting.
Not just me, Marie too, by the way.
Wow. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's, boundaries are, we talk about everybody needs some boundaries for definitions, but they're not as, maybe they're not as fluid as the El Paso, as the Rio Grande River. I don't know. That's maybe a bad analogy. Okay, so let's move on beyond. Let's go back to the screen share. That's why I keep pressing the forward button, but I'm not sharing the screen. So but it didn't do anything. Okay, we have come to the first of our sources. And there are 2 sources tonight about Judaism of being and 2 sources about Judaism of becoming. So I'm going to want to volunteer to read. And then we are going to talk about your reactions to this and characteristics of it. This is a text that we may look at more than once. It is a very powerful, well-known text. We are moving from God talking to all human beings to God talking to a single family. And it is Genesis chapter 9, chapter 12, verses 1 through 9. So anybody want to read?
I will.
Okay, the English. Thank you, Jennifer.
The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him that curses you, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you." Abram went forth as the Lord commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot and all the wealth they had amassed, and the persons that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in the land of Canaan,
Keep going.
Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem at the terebinth of Moreh.
Terebinth is a really big tree.
And the Canaanites were then in the land.
That's one of the most controversial, by the way, that's one of the most controversial phrases in the entire Torah. The Canaanites were then in the land for reasons which we will not go into tonight. Keep going, Jennifer.
The Lord appeared to Abram and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. And he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar to the Lord and invoked the Lord by name. Then Abram journeyed by stages toward the Negev.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. So any sharing reactions or thoughts about what we just saw?
Well, one, it approved the slavery because Abraham took the first second paragraph, the people he owned with his possessions.
Yeah, that's Jewish tradition, by the way, interprets that as those, just like Muhammad made his first convert was his wife, his second convert was his nephew. And then there were others in his household. In Islamic tradition and Jewish tradition, these are people who he, helped bring to Judaism also. But yes, so you noticed that. So does any other reactions, thoughts, or insights here?
It's God's promise to Abram and the Jewish people.
Okay, and the Jewish people. It's interesting. Does Abram need to do anything in response to God to attain this blessing?
Yeah, he has to move. He has to go. He has to move.
What about his children?
Well, I will make your name great.
Yeah, so what do they need to do to achieve that?
The whole family has to move.
Well, the whole family has to move, but Abram makes that decision. What do subsequent generations have to do to earn this blessed designation?
They have to
You're right. Whoever said it. Nada.
They have to believe in God.
No, they don't.
God.
No, they do not. Where does it say that? All it says, Abram has to do something, but everybody who descends from Abraham, it's a family. In a family, what do you have to do? You have to be born into the family. Later law allows ways of coming into the family if you're not born into it. But all you have to do, this is what Hartman calls the Judaism of being. It's unconditional, it's automatic, it's inherited. Being Jewish is simply who you are. That is one of the major aspects of Jewish life. It's not the only aspect of Jewish life, but that is one of the strangest things about Judaism. In fact, are you surprised that Abram becomes Abraham later, is not told anything about how he's meant to teach his children? Or how do you feel about the notion of belonging simply because you were born into a certain group?
Think about Germany in the time of World War II, where the Jews, just because.
So if you had one Jewish grandparent.
That's it. Even a half of a quarter, whatever, any kind of tie to Judaism without even, saying how they said, I'm German first, and then I'm a Jew.
Belief doesn't matter. Practice doesn't matter. Automatic.
It's like the 14th Amendment in this country. All right. If you're born in this country, it makes you a U.S. citizen, and your descendants are U.S. citizens, part of the group.
Is there a difference between being born a Jew and becoming a Jew later, like Sammy Davis Jr.?
So later Jewish law stated that there is no difference, that once you become a Jew, you kind of like almost always were Jewish, right? It's it's a complicated thing, but that is a legal fiction, right? Yesterday you were not part of us, and today you always have been. But originally it's tribal, and then of course they have to figure out a way to have those who are not born come in, and the tradition expands. But originally, this is about family. What community?
Back to your earlier question about when do you feel Jewish, or what does it mean to be Jewish? Because in a way, unlike maybe many other religious affiliations, being Jewish isn't just about whether you practice the religion, but it's kind of like an ethnic identity or who you are.
So that is a major aspect of Judaism. That's right. We're going to come to that in a second, more so.
What about marrying into Judaism? When you're marrying in and you're not a Jew to begin with, when you marry in, do you become a Jew?
Well, more so than 20 years ago, when I was a younger rabbi, I would say that I understand and perceive and get the idea of being Jewish adjacent, right? And in marrying in connecting in, people do have a way of sharing the fate of, and sometimes Kendra referred to the term, Kendra, what was it?
Oh, sorry, Peter muted me. I said
There are times I've wanted to mute Peter.
The stranger in your midst, who was
sometimes
mentioned a lot.
Yeah, so sometimes, Andrea, it's with an asterisk, but sometimes it's not. I mean, if you marry in, if you raise kids as Jews, you're blood tied to Judaism as well as marriage tied, right?
Right.
But so that's a complicated question. Let me stick for now with what communities do you belong to by virtue of your parents' choices? Anybody?
Where I was born.
So geographic ties, right?
Yeah.
Peter belongs to a big Irish Catholic family.
He's become part of, right? That's right. That wasn't by his parents' choices, but
he by his marriage.
Right.
Belonging to a temple.
To some extent, as a kid, that's right. Your parents' choices are, your parents make choices for you. That's right.
Hebrew school.
Yeah.
A regular school.
Right. Which school you go to and become part of that community as a, I prefer the term, weekday school as opposed to regular, the rabbi I grew up with. So what are we, irregular school? But, the school that you got, your school community, true.
What about social engagement? If your family like to go to baseball games or belong to the Rotary Club, that kind of thing.
So we have all of these circles of connections in our life.
How about going to bar and bat mitzvahs as kids, That was very inclusive, I think, In
Chicago, in certain neighborhoods in Chicago, there were 13-year-old Catholic kids who had big birthday parties for their 13th birthday.
Because they were jealous.
Because they were influenced by what they saw. That's right. Okay, so we're going to go on to the second text here. Michael Wissegrad was a major Jewish philosopher in the late 20th century. This is from a 1983 book. This is a fascinating selection that's a contemporary reflection on this idea of Judaism of being. The Judaism of being is, it's who you are. You don't need to do anything. You don't need, it's just you be, right? So who wants to read this one?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Rachel.
The foundation of Judaism is the family identity of the Jewish people as the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
And because I'm a Reformed Jew, I would say, and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Go ahead.
I approve. Whatever else is added to this must be seen as growing out of and related to the basic identity of the Jewish people as the seed of Abraham, elected by God through descent from Abraham. This is the crux of the mystery of Israel's election. Seen through the eyes of man, a divine election of a group defined by some ideological criterion would be far more plausible. It would have been far more understandable had God elected all those who feed the hungry and clothe the naked, or, if our sensibilities are more contemplative than active, all those who have grasped the absolute or achieved nirvana. These are accomplishments of individuals and reflect unusual endowment or effort or both. But being born into a particular family is hardly an achievement for which anyone deserves either credit or blame. God chose the route of election and of the election of a biological instead of ideological people because this was his free choice. Rarely has any theology come to grips with the contingency that follows from God's freedom.
Right, it's a little complicated, that last sentence. So let's ignore the last sentence for the moment. Any reactions to this? I'm going to keep it up here for a minute as we do general reactions.
Well, that's God's free choice is consistent with God being all powerful.
That's true, but that's the assertion of our tradition. One could say, if you didn't believe in God, you could say that our perception of our tradition is that God chose us, and therefore it was automatic after that, right? So you could fudge it if you needed to, even with your correct observation.
So I think God didn't have any idea what she was getting into. I mean, sounds good. Okay, we're going to choose you, your family. We're all good here. And then, all heck breaks loose as they turn out to be a pretty rowdy bunch. And God then has to say, maybe I need to impose some contingencies here.
But it's a story.
It's like a simple choice for a simple time.
There is a story, of course, in which the rabbis are perfectly aware of how troublesome and we are, and how much of a pain in God's non-existent neck we are. By the story that God offered the Torah to all the other groups of people, and they said, "What's in it?" And they said, "Don't rob." And one group said, "Look, we're a bunch of robbers, so no, thank you." And then God got so frustrated that God takes the mountain, holds it over the people of the Jewish people, and said, "If you accept the Torah, all is well and good, and if not, this will be your burial place." To which the Jewish people respond, "Everything that God says we will do and we will obey." Right? Or that the Jewish people accepted the Torah without being threatened, and have ever after regretted not asking about the fine print like every other group of people did. So yes, the idea of our being hard to deal with, but it's fascinating that it's like a surprising way to form a religious group, right? I mean, there are big implications to this. If identity is automatic, if you're Jewish because of how you were born, that means you don't have to believe certain things. If you don't have to believe certain things, that means that our group is going to contain what?
Diversity.
Correct. If identity is automatic, it does not depend on agreement. Disagreement then is part of the picture. It's not an accident. It's not a hiccup. It's not a flaw. You said earlier, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, 2 lawyers, 3 opinions, right? 2 Jews, 3 opinions. That's part of the picture. It's baked in. This is a natural outgrowth. When Jews disagree with each other, it is analogous to those who are in a family who are part of the same family by blood relations, right? I mean, yes, you can dissolve a family legally, those who weren't legally part of each other, and you can get emancipated as a kid, but you can't not be your parents' kid.
So you can be a Jew without actually believing in Judaism.
One can be a Jew without believing in Judaism, which is the strangest thing for a Christian to hear, right? And it's even more strange. We're going to come back to that later tonight. So let's hold off on that. But it's even more strange when you think about the fact that we invented the idea. I mean, gave to the world the idea of the one God. We're the ones that said this in the first place, and yet built into the system from our first model of the Judaism of Abraham is the idea that it's automatic. It's just based on, like, who you are, not what you believe. So let's move on from there. What are the positives of automatic belonging, and what are the challenges of it?
You always have a family.
Yeah, it's comforting.
Wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish. You're never alone when you say you're a Jew. Amsterdam, Disneyland, Tel Aviv, though we're miles apart, we all say the prayer in the depths of our heart. Anyway, yes, family, the family connection is there. And if you leave home, what is the definition of family? What's the definition of home?
You carry it with you.
Or?
Home is where the heart is.
Oh, they're the place where they have to take you back.
Well, that's the concept in Israel.
Uh-huh. They have to take you in. That's right. And by the way, automatic. Automatic. They use the same definition that Hitler did. When Brother Daniel, who was born Jewish, hidden by Catholics, and it actually took in his case, so he became Catholic and he became a monk, Brother Daniel. In the 1960s, he applies to move to Israel under the law of return. The case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And what did the Supreme Court say?
No.
Well, they didn't quite say no. They also didn't quite say yes. So here's a borderline case between the Judaism of being and the Judaism of becoming. Was he allowed to move to Israel?
I don't remember.
Yes, under the law of return. Not only was he persecuted by Hitler, but he was, anybody was allowed to move to Israel if they have one Jewish grandparent, right?
What about Meyer Lansky? Wasn't he denied?
Yeah, he was denied for other reasons. That's true. And we'll come to that in a minute. Remind me about that in a minute. But Brother Daniel was not allowed to automatically claim Israeli citizenship immediately, as you are if you move there as a Jew. I mean, if it, they said if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, he's a monk. Right? So they split the difference there. In the Brother Daniel case. So, and he, by the way, did move to Israel, became a citizen in 3 years because it's easier for anybody in the world to become a citizen of Israel, on paper anyway, than it is for anybody to become a citizen of the United States. Okay, source number 3. We are now moving from the Judaism of being to the Judaism of becoming. This is the prelude to Mount Sinai, which is why I have Mount Sinai on the corner there. This is the lead up to the giving of the 10 Commandments or the covenant at Sinai. So who wants to read?
I will.
Go ahead.
On the third new moon after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day they entered the wilderness of Sinai. Having journeyed from Rephidim, they entered the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness. Israel encamped there in front of the mountain. And Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus shall you say to the house of Jacob and declare to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine. But you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel."
This is very different than the foundation of Abraham that we looked at recently. What are your reactions to this? And in a minute, I'm going to ask you what is the most important word on this page.
He's asking something in return.
Yes, asking something in return.
Covenant.
Covenant, right?
Obey, obey.
Obey. What do you think? What do you is the most important word on this page?
I go with covenant.
I would go with covenant too.
Yeah, you're being all fancy.
I go with obey.
You're being fancy too.
Children of Israel?
It's a shorter word than that.
Faithfully.
It's yes. Who said it?
If.
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 This is not Abraham. The covenant of Abraham is automatic. It may hurt if you're a boy. On the 8th day, right? But the covenant of Abraham is automatic, inherited. The covenant of Moses has expectations. This is what Hartman calls the Judaism of becoming. It is a different aspect of Jewish life. Any reactions to this? And by the way, what's the picture here?
Looks like a collider.
It's not a part. It's very. You're on the right. It's not a particle collider, but it is. This is an experimental reactor. This is an attempt at building a what do we have now?
Fusion.
Attempt at building a fusion reactor. Right? But in asking for reactions, I chose the reactor. So reactions to this change. The covenant of Sinai is conditional. By the way, the promise to Abraham, if you look at this in terms of Zionism and look at the land, I mean, we're building the case here of being and becoming as two different models of Judaism that coexist with each other. They don't have to be in conflict, but they are very different, right? One is automatic and the other is based on what we do. Think about it for a moment. Even it applies, the earliest concern of the Torah was with our inheriting the land of Israel. Abraham was promised it as a covenant for all time, automatically. Moses was told that your descendants will live on it. What?
If
they follow the commandments, right? That creates a weird thing where we have an eternal claim, but we don't get to exercise it eternally. That depends on our behavior. That same dynamic between automatic identity and content-based identity is what's going on here. So any other reactions? I'm going to press on a little so I can give everybody a chance to share final thoughts after we get to our fourth text. If identity emerges from a covenant, then we have a part to play. Identity reflects a common set of values, laws, and ethical aspirations. Jewish identity in this model is earned by what we do. But if we see connection as contingent on our commitment, we could, and Jews have fights with each other all the time about what?
Everything.
If we are saying that to be a Jew means to do and believe this, what do we have fights with each other about?
Following the laws.
Well, yeah, what is this? How do we interpret this, right? So here is a model of Judaism which says Judaism is based on our substance. And then we get fights with each other about what that substance is. Got it? So that's not an argument.
Don't we always fight about it in a political sense as well?
Well, let's talk about politics. We'll get there in just a second.
I'm sorry, I just have to be.
I'm going to rush through a little bit of this slide to get to because Karen just said politics. This is an interview with Rabbi Sharon Brous. Rabbi Brous is the founder in LA. Nancy, you're in LA? LA area? Oh, Nancy said she had to go. That's right. Of the group called ICAR, which is a group of, it's a spiritual community, but it is not, and it meets for services, but it also meets for service. It's not entirely founded based on what your belief about God is or what your background is. It is united around something else. It's united around a progressive approach to applying Jewish values to the world around us. In other words,
it's political.
It's, well, it has political implications. What I would say is it's a commitment to a shared moral outlook, which has political implications. The bottom line is it would probably be difficult to be a very right-wing conservative Republican and be part of IKAR. That is not, but that is not banned. And there are Republicans who are part of IKAR, because in Southern California, there are Republicans, a few of them, who behave the way Republicans have decades ago, right? So it has political, what I would say is it has political implications, but it's not fundamentally political in nature. But let's read what Sharon Brous had to say. So who wants to read this?
I'll read.
Go ahead.
When we were building IKAR, I realized that I wasn't interested at all in the movement question. What I wanted to do was bring together people who were interested in asking, what does it mean to be a Jew and a human being in a world on fire? I don't frankly care if you identify as Reform or Modern Orthodox. For me, I say what I need to say. I'm not looking to build the biggest, widest tent so that any person with any political perspective should and could feel absolutely comfortable here. I think in those environments, we become so neutral and so numb that we can't actually say something.
Any reactions to this? I have a very strong reaction to this as a rabbi.
Well, I think it means that if you try to be so non-offensive and overly inclusive that everyone can be involved without ever having their sensibilities ruffled, then you become sort of neutralized. So there are certain maybe moral positions that may have a political overtone that should be pursued, and if that offends some people, then that's their problem.
So this is a particular community within a group of communities. So that's one safeguard here, right? We can still say the larger Jewish people has many such, but this has all kinds of, by the way, I don't like her trashing movements. I think that's a little bit disingenuous. I think it's disingenuous when Chabad says, oh, we're just Jews, we're not part of a movement. Of course they're part of the movement, right? And she is part, and she, IKAR, may not be formally affiliated with a movement, but it certainly is part of a movement that would not have been possible without the Reform and conservative movements in Judaism. So I discount a little bit the anti-denominational sentiment. Unfortunately, that sentiment is widespread and is hurting us. But I generally say I do want to build a wide tent, but I don't really mean that I want to build an infinitely wide tent. I mean, there are certain things that I won't do. What are they? Any of some of you know them, who know me, know this.
I'd like to share something.
Okay, go ahead.
So in Hawaii, I'm originally from New York. I've lived in the Caribbean, a lot of different places. One of the hardest things for me to get used to here in Hawaii is people are very passive aggressive. They don't speak up for what they believe in or what they really want to say. And obviously, as a former New Yorker, I'm just the opposite. I had to learn that wasn't really welcomed. And sometimes it's really hard to be in a place where people don't really say how they feel about things.
Especially, Kathy, if they are bound by unstated assumptions that they share in common that you don't even know about.
Right. And it's a mix of cultures here, but there's a whole big, broad umbrella of cultures that just like, you don't really speak your mind, and that can be frustrating and detrimental to people and people on the, in the islands. But it's a very real thing here. And, it's hard for frank discussions on issues when people don't speak up and engage in conversation, real meaningful conversation.
Thank you. So to circle back to Rabbi Brous is not going to be comfortable in Hawaii. She is not somebody who hides where she is coming from about certain things. She got into a big public spat with Rabbi Daniel Gordis not too long ago about the ability to criticize certain policies of Israel. And I was, 98.5% on her side in my own reaction. But values can be a powerful glue. But what happens when different groups in the community disagree about which values they should share? I do want to give you one other example. Marilyn is the current president of the congregation. We chose in the 1940s and early 50s to become part of the Reform movement. To be part of the Reform movement means certain things. I like Jewish tradition, and the Reform movement is welcoming many more new approaches to Jewish tradition and Hebrew. But, it's not going to be a Reform service if you put up a division between men and women. That is outside the bounds. A mechitza is outside the bounds of what it means to be a Reform Jew. At this point, I would say that whatever your we are part of a community where we have officiated at gay marriages in the synagogue itself, where there have been women as cantors and rabbis here. We are that is who we are. That is who we stand for, and we recognize that even though we were until the 2000s, when Chabad came, we were the only Jewish congregation on the island. We stand for certain things, and there are boundaries and borders. And those who think that being gay is the worst sin in the history of the universe, and who don't believe that women have equal rights, can go to Chabad. Otherwise we have an overlap of people who could go to either place, but there are things we stand for. So the question becomes sort of, where do you draw the circle? Who's in? How do you draw it? Who's in? Who's out? And in what ways does this approach to Judaism, saying, look, there are certain things we stand for, resonate with you? Or have you been on the other side of this when there are congregations that take positions that you're not comfortable with?
I live in a village in Florida. It's Century Village, where you had a Reform congregation and a conservative congregation that had to merge because there weren't enough people for the conservative, and they owned a building. And the Reform congregation, to which I belonged, we were paying rent on a building, and the owner took it away. So we were forced to merge. Now, it's very interesting how we had to accommodate one another in the services to find a rabbi who could bridge the gap. And somehow it's working. Somehow it's working. It's very interesting.
We can bump up. Jews can be stubborn, but that merger can work, and that merger in Niagara Falls, New York. Peter, is it still true that there are two synagogues there?
Sorry, Michael, I don't know.
Okay. So my friend Sarah Perman, Rabbi Perman, who was on with us on Erev Simchat Torah, grew up in Niagara Falls. I think that there are two synagogues with two buildings, one of which has 50 members, the other has 80 members, both of which are large buildings. one of which has 4 Torah scrolls, the other of which has 6 Torah scrolls, and they would not merge because of cookies. Because they did not agree on how kosher their merged place should be. And there they are with many years. I don't know if they both still exist. The conservative one may have just gone under rather than merge. So, what do we share? How do we share? Where do we draw our boundaries? These are 2 very different models. The Judaism of being is you're Jewish automatically. And that has the benefit of a family connection, right? And it embraces it brings under one roof people who have even very sharp disagreements with each other. The Judaism
However, sorry.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I really do think that some of us at least have boundaries, and that it becomes difficult to live in situations where those boundaries are not, respected. I was part of the movement in our synagogue, and I know Andrea will remember this because I don't think we always agreed on it, but I was militant about the idea that God should be referred to as a man and wanted gender neutral prayer books. And I had to fight the synagogue and there were women that said, oh, I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. And to me, it made every difference in the world, because it meant that the moment a female child is born, that child is inferior because God is a man.
And you were ahead of your time, because eventually the movement took that choice away, right?
Yes.
It said, this is just who we are and what we stand for. On the other hand, Marilyn, I remember being out to dinner, being shocked with you. I'm going to get very, very personal now. You have a gay son. And there we were out to dinner with close friends of yours who completely and totally reject the idea of gay rights. And you found common ground with them that I could not find. And my daughter, who was at that dinner, who is bisexual, was beside herself at that dinner.
Who were we with?
If you don't remember, it was
No.
I know.
We'll talk about it later. Katina knows.
Yeah, I don't remember because.
I mean, you could have put my jaw back up off the ground from what they were saying. There's a reason you don't remember it, and that was a very bad day the next day. So
I was blocking it out. Oh.
Yeah. So you're blocking it out. That's fine. So Wikipedia says the conservative congregation Niagara Falls disbanded in 2011. So my illustration is out. Okay. Friends, those of you who have studied with me before, Ellen, if you're still with us, Ellen Garrick, you've seen this before. This is my version. This is the way for my whole career. I taught the idea of being and becoming with different words and different language. But basically, we'll circle back on this in a minute, but I'm going to do this fairly quickly. As an oversimplification, this is Christianity. This is your mind on Christianity. What? No, sorry, just kidding. Right? Christianity is about, as you see my arrow pointing upward, the relationship of the individual with God. What makes you a Christian is what you believe. My word for this, not just my word, is faith. It's a spirituality, a belief, a relationship with God. It doesn't make sense. You could be a Christian and say you don't believe in God, but like you'll really confuse a minister or a priest, right? That is just not the case in Judaism. Judaism, of course, is also a faith. We invented the idea of the one God. And if we had more time, I would go more into what I mean by we invented it. Judaism is, of course, also a faith tradition, but we are also, and I used to get into terrible trouble with my 10th graders. I would say I need a word to describe Judaism that begins, a 4-letter word that begins with F and ends with K.
Folk.
Well, and they would eventually say fork. And I say, you're right. Judaism has a lot to do with
Food.
Food. That's correct. But the word I was looking for is folk. So the way I have always taught being and becoming, and I think being and becoming is better than the way I've taught it, is I've always taught this through faith and folk. That Jewish identity is a combination. Now, by the way, you can, and look, I've never, annotate 1 second. I've always not liked it when people have done this, but now I'm going to try. You can have different groups within Christianity that resemble this. African American Baptists, right? Or Greek Orthodox, where the food, or Irish Catholics, right? Where the food, the neighborhood, the culture, the church are all bound up together. But if you went into a Greek Orthodox priest, even if you made the best baklava, even if you ran their biggest fundraiser of the year, and you said to that priest, I do not believe in God, the priest could say, you are not a Christian. A smart priest might not say it, but a priest could say that. As an oversimplification, if you said that to me, whoops, I could not say you were not, well, I suppose I could say you were not a Christian, but that's not my job, right? If somebody came in to me and said they don't believe in God, I can't say you are not a Jew. That is because Judaism is both being and becoming. Judaism is about both automatic identity and about earned identity. Or, in the words I've used, it's a combination of faith and folk. I have always viewed Jewish life as being on a spectrum, although I have to give a footnote here to both Benjamin and Daniel, who separately and without consulting with each other, when they were in 10th grade in my class, both of them objected to my model here, and I'll show you why they were right in a minute. You can be somebody way on the faith end in Jewish life, where you passionately believe in God, you attend services every Shabbat, even if you don't really understand Hebrew, if you went to a Reformed synagogue 40 years ago every week, but you can hate bagels and lox, right? You can still be Jewish if you hate bagels and lox. Or you could be on the folk end. You could love Yiddish theater, serve in the Israeli army, be committed to the Jewish people, and you can be an atheist who eats ham and cheese in public on Yom Kippur. Both of these are Jews. I happen to believe that a healthy expression of Jewish identity is a combination of the two, but I can't force that on people. I can say that in the United States, with so many mixed married families, even somebody who was born Jewish, but who is culturally Jewish, a Jew of being, and it's automatic, if they want their kids to be Jewish, they may have to join a synagogue because they can't, if they marry into a nice Irish Catholic family, right? They can't automatically have that Jewish by osmosis experience that they had growing up unless they consciously create it. The final thing I'll say, because we're past time to end, so I have to end soon. The observation by my kids was that this spectrum was an oversimplification. It implies if you're higher on one end, you're lower on the other. And what they said is, Dad, you can be, it's a diagram like this. You can be high on both faith and folk, or you could be low on both in terms of identity. But my general point here is being and becoming, Abraham and Moses, faith and folk. Jewish life rests on these two pillars. There are multiple ways of understanding what binds Jews as a group. One way is through the concept of being. People are part of the Jewish people, not by virtue of how they behave or what they believe, but simply because they are Jewish. This way about thinking about Judaism collectively means that the Jewish people will contain within it groups that disagree with each other about how to act Jewishly, but are still part of one collective by virtue of being Jewish. Another way to understand what binds the Jewish collective is the concept of becoming. Membership in the Jewish people requires believing and doing certain things, not about being Jewish, but about how one expresses one's Judaism. This way about thinking about Jewish collectively means drawing boundaries and leaving out people who behave differently than your group. And a major challenge to Jewish people today is the tendency for Jews in North America to emphasize communities of values, Jewish becoming, and de-emphasize Jewish being. And by the way, that is why so many Jews in North America have a trouble with Zionism, because they are not getting the peoplehood automatic aspect, and the concept of Israel and a Jewish state depends on a Judaism of being, not a Judaism of becoming. Reflections, review, your thoughts, your comments, your reaction. 0-0 tied game, Yankees, Red Sox.
Oh, that's outdated. The Red Sox scored 2 runs.
What? Oh no, Red Sox scored 2 runs. Never mind.
God is not all powerful, obviously.
God is not all powerful. Okay. Reflections and review. I am stopping the screen share, going back to gallery view. I'm amazed I still have all 17 of you. Thoughts, reactions, comments. I hope this is part of what you hope to get out of tonight. As I said, as an introduction to Judaism, it is not about how to light a Hanukkah candle. Kendra.
Is it, with the being and becoming thing, is it fair to say that being is necessary for becoming? Being either because you're, born Jewish or because you convert?
One can make the practical argument that it is not, and that there are people who just are so immersed in a Jewish activities and Jewish life that they sort of slip into a kind of thinking of themselves as Jewish. You're trying to argue that one is primary over the other when you really push the envelope.
Not necessarily primary, but that one is necessary in order to do the other. I mean,
I think that just
because you feel Jewish is not, at least when the way Peter and I were taught way back when in our first intro to Judaism class 35 years ago, was that there were certain absolute requirements, like you're either born Jewish or you formally join the Jewish community through however you describe it, conversion, adoption, something like that. And this whole idea that you can be Jewish just because I feel so Jewish and I do all these Jewish things. What was it, that joke called, where, I feel wonderful, the son to his mother, I feel so Jewish, except it's the equivalent of saying, I feel like a sea captain, I'm such a wonderful sea captain. And the mom says, son, to you, you're a sea captain, to your mother, you're a sea captain, but to the other sea captains, are you a sea captain?
Yeah,
I'm not sure
that you may be really fully onto something. The flaw in the system here, and remember I said sort of try the Brother Daniel case, I alluded to it. What about the flaw in the system here? The flaw in the system is the Jews for Jesus. I don't mean Jews for Jesus in the first century when that term made sense. I mean now, right? What if somebody is born Jewish and comes to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and then wants to say that they are still Jewish? That is the flaw in the system here. The flaw in the system here is, and this is offensive to those who are believing, practicing Christians, because somebody listening to this can say, you mean to say that it's better to be, Judaism says it's better to be an atheist than to believe in Jesus? And so the question is, what question are you asking? Is it better for the sake of the Jewish people and the Jewish future to be an atheist than to believe in Jesus as the Son of God? I'm sorry, yes.
Oh, I happen to agree with you.
Okay. Is it better for an individual whose life is in jail and is addicted to drugs and is in jail who finds Jesus and turns into a much better person? Obviously, it's better. Go be a Christian, right? Right. So on an individual level, it may well be better, right? The flaw in the system is if you're Judaism automatically, and you're not, and therefore it doesn't depend on belief or behavior, and then you come to join the other team, does that really take you out? And that's my response to that.
I assume the answer to your last question is yes, it does kick you out.
Well, no problem. I resonate with the Judaism of being, but on that issue, I'm a Jew of becoming.
Well, there you go.
Ellen.
Yeah, what about this emphasis that I think many Reform congregations have on universalism, where it's sort of we all have universal values, and where does I have a problem with that, because if that's the case, like who are we?
Right.
And in every religion, is against murder. But where would that fit in on your continuum?
I'm going to try to answer that simply, but I'm unable to answer questions simply. So I will say this. Remember that you can say that ethics are universal, but the fact is ethics are not universal. And different traditions have different views on Judaism and Catholicism have different views on abortion. I mean, I know Catholics for choice, right? But ethics is not universal, right? Nevertheless, there is a general sense of what is right and what is wrong that is very widely shared, okay? When you push specifics and get into details, there are differences, but it's very widely shared. So what I would say is the mistake of the early Reform movement, the mistake of some ultra-Orthodox Jews is to say that ritual is more important than ethics. As this is an oversimplification. The mistake of the early Reform movement was to say that ethics is ultimately more important than ritual. And so if I were to do this in a simple way, I would say ethics tells us what to do. Ritual behavior rehearses for us who we are. It reenacts our story, the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the Passover story, the holidays, which tell the journey of the soul and of being a better person, right? So I think the early Reform movement was wrong to go all universal, but there are balances. And look, it's a danger to the Jewish people how universal North American Jews are. And it's a danger to the Jewish people how particularistic Jews in B'nai Brak are. You know where I'm really comfortable being a Jewish universalist, where I feel connected to everyone in the world? Tel Aviv. Because when I'm there, I'm speaking a Jewish language. I'm surrounded by street names that recite Jewish history. I'm surrounded by a Judaism that I imbibe. And so it's safe to be universalist, right? So the universal, the connection to everybody in the world and the connection to just the Jewish people is also like a spectrum. And you have to be aware of your surroundings and can't go too far either way, depending on the surroundings. One is a corrective to the other. Rachel, did you get out of this what you wanted tonight?
Big time. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Because what about Kathy in Hawaii?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Any closing comments or thoughts from anybody for now? Remember, we did a very big overview tonight and introductions to each other. So probably next week we will be able to end on time, right? But I did the overview of the whole series.
I feel so full, so full.
Emily Calhoun, any thoughts to share? You're muted. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, sorry. No, I had a good time. Thank you. I did a lot. Thank you.
Thanks. I can go over the deep end in being abstract, so I hope we brought it back and the texts will help anchor us. Sharon.
I just wanted to mention that something that was very important to me before I bought my condo on St. Croix was that there was a Jewish community there. That, that feeling a part of something, even if I didn't know anybody on the whole island, I knew that I could go to the synagogue there and be a part of it.
Yeah,
And now I'm on the board. So,
Yeah.
that
Well,
was
I
important
do.
to me.
I will say again that I do want to try to bring our communities closer together somehow. And
Yep.
I want to go do an evening of teaching and spend 2 nights on St. Croix, which I haven't had a chance to do. So
Okay.
at some point. And when you're seasonal, when Rabbi Delbick is in, I'm happy to bring her over here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other, Sydney, thank you.
Does
Any
it
other
work?
thoughts?
Does it work now? Can you hear me now?
Welcome, Sydney from Canada. We finally.
I'll tell you what.
Prime Minister Trudeau finally dropped the bar to communicating with Americans. Go ahead.
No. I'll tell you what I did. I connected my computer to my big screen, and I connected the sound from my computer to the big screen, which canceled the speaker on my computer.
Haven't we all learned things during COVID? Wow.
Welcome, Sydney. And Sydney, I'm in Plattsburgh, New York, so I'm not too far from you.
You're about 1,000,000 miles away because you won't let me into your country.
I know. I can come. I can come to Canada.
Sydney, where are you in Canada?
Montreal, Quebec, east.
Beautiful. Yeah, we're in Buffalo.
Okay, not too far.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Thank you. And I'll see you next Tuesday night, if not sooner.
Stay safe.
Take care. Bye, everyone.